Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on installing the fuel lines from the tank up to the front end of the car, and we're going to go ahead and install the e-stop emergency brake system. So let's get started. First thing you need to know about running fuel lines, if you're going to use these AN fittings and this PTFE line, is you got to know how to put the fittings together. So if you haven't seen that before, basically you get the fitting and you unscrew the lower half of it. Looks like that, okay? Now, the way you trim this line is you put painter's tape or some similar tape around the outside of it, and then I cut it with an angle grinder very carefully and slowly. What you want to try to do is you don't want to damage the hose on the inside, and you don't want it to be all frayed and ridiculous on the outside here. You'll see why that's important in a minute. With this nylon stuff, you can come back with a lighter and kind of burn some of the fuzz off and use your hand to kind of press it in there, and that'll make the next step easier. So for the next step, the end of this part that screws onto the bottom of the AN fitting is kind of opened up like this to allegedly make this easier, but it is still kind of difficult. What you got to do is try to get everything inside there and push it all the way down until it's flush with the top of the fitting. I'll show you a picture of that in a second here. Okay, so I don't know if you can see down in there. I'll try to get you a better shot later if you cannot. But the rubber hose is flush with the base of the threads here. And as I look down inside there, the rubber hose isn't compromised. It's not collapsed in or any pieces hanging in there. If it were, I'd take a screwdriver and try to smooth those out. If I can't smooth those out, you got to take it apart, cut another section, and start again, because you don't want any wrinkles or crinkles in there, because that's where you're going to get leaks. All right, once you get this on, it's easy peasy from here. You're just going to screw this thing in, and this will firmly attach the fitting to the line. You'll do it with 2 wrenches, and you'll do it till it's snug. You don't go ape tight on these. And these surfaces here and here usually do not touch. It's usually 1/8 of an inch or slightly less when it gets nice and snug. You don't want to over tighten it, so that's how you're going to leave it. I'll show you a good picture up close of what it looks like when it's done. Notice the small gap. All right, now we're going to try to run the fuel lines themselves. We're going to start back here at the tank, work our way forward. Because I have the inline fuel pump, because I have the in-tank fuel pump and I'm going to do an inline filter, my plan is to start clean here, kind of pick up this rail here. We're going to follow it down to the main tube under the body of the car, and we're basically going to follow that all the way up to the front, and we're just going to drop it in front with the hoses exposed, waiting for the engine to come so we can get everything set up the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to install my fuel filter on the main rail, the main body rail, under the floor here, because I think that'll make it really easy to get to change it, clean it out. It doesn't need to be changed. You just assemble it and clean it. But if I mount it right there, it's really easy to jack up the car and get right to it without having to mess with all this stuff back here. So that's the plan. Let's get started and see how it goes. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the feed side. The delivery side is the one that's closest to the cannon plug here. It's the one on the right on mine. If you have not marked them before you put it in there, and you don't know which is which, because in this case, they're both 3/8, you might have to take this apart and look inside. I'm not saying I had to do that, but it is possible. So from here, I'm going to come around the corner and I'm going to hook it. I'm going to have the first attachment point right where that piece of blue tape is, right there. And that'll get me clear of the A-frames and everything underneath. And then that'll carry me across to right here on the side of the fuselage. We'll hook here. I said fuselage, I meant the chassis. We'll hook here to keep it out of the way of the A-arm. And then we'll make our corner on the main frame down here at the base. We'll pick up there, and then we'll start heading towards the engine, which is that way. Okay, we're going to use the little collars supplied in the kit, and we're going to use self-tapping screws. Later on, if I don't like the self-tapping screws, I may go back and change these over to rivets. But for now, I'm just going to put this in loosely, because eventually we're going to tag team and double these things up, and I'll show you what that'll look like once we get to that. So pretty simple. We're just going to line this up here, and now I had pre-drilled the hole a little bit there so it would look cool on TV, but normally it takes a little bit more for it to get going. So that's just in there loose for now. And then I'm going to come down here, put this one down here, and do the same thing all the way up to the front of the car. And I'll show you what that looks like when we're done. Okay, so here we go. Let's take a look at the completed fuel line. Come off the tank there with the 2 AN fittings. I put a little support here so these things don't flop around too much. And then we'll move slowly to here, where you can see they're hooked up there. All right, so it comes, attaches right there, continues on along. It kind of tucks up kind of high underneath there, so we're out of the way of the A-frame. Attaches there, come on down, right there, and then we go under the car. We're going to run along the tube there. So I've got on the cross member there, that's where I put my fuel filter. I got it up out of the way as far as I could, and it should be easy to get to if I have to clean it, which I will do annually. Follow it up the rest of the way. And then from there, it just spills up into the engine compartment. And there you can see them come up across the main rail, and they're just sitting there hanging. If you look down on the floor, you can see I had about 3 foot extra that came with that Evil kit that I showed you earlier. So we're good to go. That's it. The fuel lines are plumbed, and now we're just going to wait for the motor. All right, the last thing we're going to address is the vent line. In the state of Kentucky, I'm not required to use that emissions box, so I'm not going to stuff that big thing under my car. But what I did do is I took the vent line, and I got a little, I don't know if that's a lawnmower or motorcycle fuel filter, and I cut the top off of it so it wouldn't be poking around. Let's get it down where we can see it. And I snipped the top off of it here so that the stem wouldn't be sticking around to catch anything. But what this will do for me is it'll allow it to breathe freely, but at the same time it'll keep any debris or garbage from getting in there. If you'll notice over here, kind of hard to see, I did the same thing with my transmission vent. You can see it stuffed down in there. So that's what I'm going to do next, and I'll show you a picture of what it looks like when I'm done. There it is, nothing cosmic. Well, you've probably seen these roll bars installed for a while now. They've just been kind of sitting here. These are the Breeze roll bars. They're the 2-inch bars. I think they look a lot nicer than the stock ones that come with the Mark IV. What I really like about them is the way they go together. You don't have that ugly bolt in the middle there. Plus the thicker tube, to me, looks a lot better. So I went with that. So let's talk about these Breeze bars, because I have to drill the holes to get these out of the way to move on to what I want to do next. So the way the Breeze bars work is you get it in 2 pieces, okay? Or actually a total of 3 pieces. You have the curve, the straight pipe, and then this little sleeve right here, which is really super hard to move because my pipe's not perfect. I'll explain that in a minute. So what you do is this sleeve here slides up into the tube, okay? That allows you to lift the whole thing off, okay? And then when you go to put it back together, this drops back down, you line it up, and pretend that it's set up properly so that this just slides back down in place. So, the trick is to put this together and get this spot welded well enough that this still lines up. And I gotta be honest with you, I struggled with it quite a lot. When I had it first put together, I tack welded it because I'm capable of that. But I can't do a really good weld, so I went off to a professional welder to drop some dimes on there and make it look good for me. But because of the heat and all that, it's off by just a little bit. And I've had to heat it and bend it and all that sort of stuff to get it close. But once you get it there, I mean, you slide this pipe down like this, and it is, takes a little muscle to get it on there. So there you go. Now I'm locked in. Then what you do is you put a bolt here, a bolt here, a bolt here, and a bolt here. And that holds the whole thing in place. And what I really like about that is none of that is visible to people on the outside of the car. So I've got to move these out of the way, but I've got them exactly where I want them right now. So I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes that'll hold those bolts, those 1/4 inch holes, to keep this thing in place. Now I already went through it on this side, so I could see exactly what that would entail. And the way I did it was I went with a 1/8 drill first, and then a 1/4, and I'm going to use 1/4 bolts. All right, y'all know how a damn drill works. Let me just finish it up and I'll show you what it looks like. There it is, 4 bolts, 4 holes, easy peasy. Okay, next step, we're going to go ahead and install the e-stop emergency brake. The directions that you see on the website from 520 Speedworks show them installing it underneath the car along the side of the transmission. I didn't like that very much, so I went into forums and did some digging, and I found a post from a guy named OB6 who has his mounted right here, and it's very slick, very clean, out of the way, and that's how I'm going to mount this one. So the first thing I'm going to do, the e-stop box itself gets mounted right here to this rail. I have a bolt here, and a bolt down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to drill the bolt holes for the e-stop first so that I'm sure that they're centered on the tube. And then I'll come back around, put the panels back on, drill through the panels. I'll go through from the back to drill the hole and button it all up, and then I'll put this back on. The next piece that goes on after that is this little splitter, which is going to pick up the cables as they come up from underneath the fuselage, underneath the chassis. It'll pick up the cables and feed it down into the e-stop. So let's get started on that and see how it goes. All right, so you can see we got the e-box hooked up to the top rail here, and there'll also be some bolts for the tin down here, but the real support's going to come from this rail here. The next piece that goes on is the part that's going to receive the actual cables. This slips over the end here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to line it up on these rods to where it will set just about like this. So the cables will come up here and feed in, and then this will sit about like that. I'll get it all together and you'll see what I mean. Works pretty well. It's a pretty clean installation. All right, I got my holes drilled here. Now we're ready to go ahead and practice fit this. It slips over the end here. Followed by okay. Come on. I want to do it for real, of course, I'll put washers on there, but so that's it. That's how that goes, right? And then the cables will hook into here. They come up and they hook in just like this. And then I'll have to show you how we make the cables draw up to the actual E-stop. It's pretty simple. We'll get to that in just a second. All right, so that's what it's going to look like. We'll go ahead and Cleco drill, rivet, and get these panels on, and then we can go ahead and mount it up permanently. Okay, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put this back panel in place, then drill front to back to get those holes opened up. Okay, so you can see we've got the panel all installed here. Now I'm going to back drill my holes so that I'll accept the E-stop. Did I mention the importance of good drill bits? When they get old, throw them away. It's a lot better than tearing up your stuff. Amazing how much better it works with a new drill bit, huh? All right, so I'm just going to drill the rest of these holes and get this all set up, and then I'll go ahead and mount the E-stop in place, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. Okay, we got it all hooked up here now. You can see I've only got 2 bolts here, and then diagonally on this bracket here. Really all that is to hold this to the car. There's no real forces on this box or on this bracket itself. All of the forces for the engagement happen right in here between these 2 metal tabs. One thing I did find out though, after I got it all bolted up and looking pretty, is these 2 holes here that accept the brake line are just one size too small. So I got to take it all off and open that up just a little bit so it'll accept the brake lines. And I'll show you what that looks like once I get it all installed. Okay, let's talk about cables. With this setup here, the cable that's on the right side needs to be just a little bit longer. So you can see here, this is the stock cable on the left. It looks like it's about 14 inches longer than the stock cable. However, the inside on the stock cable is longer than this cable here. So I'm going to use, for it to work, I got to take the cable out of the stock one and put it into the one that I bought. I would love to tell you what the part number for this is, but I bought it about 6 months ago. There's not a mark on it, and I don't have a clue what it is. So the easiest thing to do is just go in and ask them if they'll let you walk in the back, which they'll do here. And here's a good look at the difference in the measurement between the 2. The shorter one here is the stock one. But you do need to make sure that the cable on the inside is the same length or longer than the stock one, or it won't work. So once we get the cable switched out, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this part of the inner part of the cable from the stock sheath, and we have to put the proper end on it. I'll show you a close-up of the way it hooks into the brake assembly here. And in the kit, it comes with a bunch of clevises and all this other stuff, and it really is just kind of dirty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a, let's see what it's called here. I'm going to put a cable stop assembly on the end of it. You can see how this one is horizontal. We need one that's perpendicular. So I bought some at the store. You can get these at any hardware store, at any auto parts store. It's just called cable stop assortment. There you go right there. And we're going to use the 5/16 to make this work. Now let me show you real quick what it looks like when it's done. and then I'll show you how we got there. I know that's a little out of order, but it'll help it make more sense. Okay, so this is where everything hooks together here. The cable comes up through the bottom like this, and then it takes a little bit of love. Then there's a C-clamp that'll slide on right here to hold that in place. We'll show you that after. But the way this works here is they had a bunch of clevises and stuff, and I just thought it looked like garbage. We use these cable stops all the time on the sprint cars and give them a ton of abuse. I'll show you how we build it in a minute, but this is how it's going to look like in the end. This slides through here like this, and then goes down, and then there you go. So that just moves like that. See how clean that is? It's a work of art, by God. So we're going to go ahead and install these on our cables, get it all set up. I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so here's the stock cable right here. And what I want is I want the inside part, because I'm going to use this on the other cable that I have, the mystery cable. So to get this out, what we need to do is we're going to need to cut off both ends. We'll cut off this end here, pull it on out all the way, then we'll cut this end off, and we'll do the necessary surgery to make this work. I'm going to go the caveman route and use an angle grinder. If you have appropriate cable cutters, it's a lot easier, but I don't have those, and to cut two cables isn't worth it. So here we go. The trick is to go real slow so you don't screw the ends up, get it all filed up. Now, we can pull this out of here. Ta-da! All right. Next thing I need to do is remove some of this Teflon here so we can access the cable. All right, nice and clean. Now, the way these work is the cable slides through the little hole, and then this screw goes in and pinches the cable in place to hold it. Works even better if I use the right size screw, which would be the one I just dropped. Like nothing ever happened. So this pinches the cable. The problem is, this is a 1/16 hole. This is a 1/8 cable, maybe even a little bigger. So step one is to drill this out to accept this cable. Okay, so you slide this on, let it stick up about 1/8 of an inch or so, and then you put the screw in with some red Loctite. And you tighten it down to hold the cable in place. You might have to put it in the vise to get good leverage. Let's see if I can do it by hand here. I can, but I'm going to put it in the vise anyway. All right, you want to get that nice and tight. And then what you want to do is I take a small screwdriver or a razor blade, and I start bending these top ones out, okay? And what I'm doing is I'm just opening it up so that I can go ahead and drop some solder in here. So we're going to use the screw to trap it. Then we're going to drop solder on the top. Then we'll drop solder in the hole on the other side, on this side here. And then we'll cut off the bolt and we'll file this down smooth using the wheel, and that way it holds the cable and it's clean enough that it can slide into the mount without getting hooked up. Here we go. Okay, so you can see I've kind of got everything spread out a little bit here. All I'm going to do is heat this thing up with a torch and drop some solder and flux down in there. And there's a good look at the completed product. That sucker should be pretty stout. Okay, there's a good look of a completed installation right there. See how nice and clean that is without all the crevices and all that. And you can kind of follow the thing down, and we'll hop over here. Now right now, I've got these cables secured with zip ties, and that's because I'm going to drive it a little bit and see how it rides and see if anything's rubbing, anything like that. And if everything looks good and nothing's rubbing, see this one comes off here, comes up to there, and then they both come out here, and this is what the finished assembly looks like. I'm going to run the cord through this hole right here. I'm going to get a little rubber grommet to go there, and that'll get it to the inside of the car so that I can hook it up with all the rest of the wiring going back to the front. So there you have it. E-stop complete. Thank you, OB6. Well, all right. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and come back next time. We'll be installing all the brake lines. Fingers crossed. Okay, let's see here. Valentine's Day, we'll get her some roses. And she told me to get my own, so let's see here. Nothing says I love you like a set of heat shields for my pipes. There you go. Happy Valentine's Day.